Hi again, welcome back to the podcast. It's China Manufacturing Decoded here from Sofeast. Adrian on hosting duty today, and Renaud's with me. Hi, Renaud.
Hey, you're full of energy today. What's going on?
Well, I try my best. So you've been to the Hong Kong Electronics Trade Fair just gone. We're recording this on April the 13th. So you've just been in the trade fair, right?
Yeah, started yesterday in Hong Kong. I went to the one in Wan Chai, organized by the Trade Development Council. And there's another one by Global Sources in Asia World Expo that's just next to Hong Kong Airport, which features also electronic products, but also components. It's an interesting one. But I went to that one, Global Sources one, last in October. They were just restarting the trade shows. It was quite tiny still. I guess it's much bigger now already. This time I went to have a look in Wan Chai, the good old TDC trade shows. Yeah.
Is there a lot of foreign attendees around?
Yeah, I mean, a number of them are, they look foreign, but they're from Hong Kong, so you're not really sure, right? But or from Shenzhen or someplace, right? It's not to the level of 2018, 2019. Also, in terms of exhibitors, I think it's not as big, but it's it's decent size already on three levels. It was a bit smaller than I thought, than I was used to. But hey, it takes time. Things will grow back. We'll see.
Any key observations to share?
It was all Chinese, and some Hong Kongese, and you could count the companies from outside of China and Hong Kong, maybe on the fingers of a hand. I'm exaggerating, but that's really the feeling it was giving us, right? Apart from that, nothing really special. It's the usual hot categories. Actually, you go to Huaqiangbei in Shenzhen and you see some of the exact same products.
Yeah.
And then you walk around and say, oh yeah, okay, they do this and this together like this. Oh, okay, it's kind of fun. First time I see it, and then you walk 5 minutes later, you see the same thing in another booth, and you walk 10 minutes later, you see it another booth with the exact same thing, So when something appears and seems to be interesting, the buyers will take a sample or take some photos, show it to some others who will copy it, or it's not even the suppliers themselves copying themselves, of course it is, but it's also the buyers taking a sample from one supplier, sending it to another one, and then they will copy it and so on, right? It's the buyers have a big role in this also.
Yeah.
You go to the Canton Fair in a couple of days, and it's going to be, on the electronics part of it, a lot of the same stuff anyway.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we all know how it is when you go to the electronics markets in China and you just see a million different like e-scooters, and they're all the kind of the same thing. And but it's funny, like don't really get those in the West, so it's kind of a very Chinese sort of thing to me.
Yeah. But there's some categories. It's like maybe 10 product categories that account for 65-70% maybe of the exhibitors. So.
Okay. Well, either way, though, trade fairs in Asia, it is happening. Well, especially in Hong Kong and China, they are happening. And as we've mentioned before, now access to Hong Kong and China, it's a lot easier than it was when we had zero COVID. So there you go.
Yes.
It's definitely possible to go. You've spent the odd week or few in a hotel room because of zero COVID, so you definitely know what I mean.
Right. Oh yes.
Yeah.
That's long gone. You can feel it. Hong Kong kind of, was slipping into oblivion, or maybe just what's the exact word? Irrelevance.
Yeah.
And getting a bit more activity, so it's good to see. Good to see that.
Excellent. All right. So let's crack on with today's topic, episode 159, by the way. And today we are talking about some of the top mistakes committed by new buyers. So if you're new to buying from Asia, and I suppose especially with a focus on China and India and others like that, there are some mistakes that we see people commit time and time again. They're quite damaging mistakes, and they're definitely worth avoiding. So you're just going to go through kind of a list of these mistakes that are worth avoiding, basically, Renaud, right?
Right, all right. So it's funny because we found this article from 2011 that I wrote.
Yeah, I know.
In 2011, wow, July 2011. And it's like, yeah, this is still the kind of issues that new buyers run into. I mean, not much to change. So let's go through this list. It's interesting. And the first one is looking for the lowest price. Because you go on Alibaba or Global Sources or Made in China, whatever, or you go to a trade show and you say, well, I'm good looking for that kind of, I don't know, Bluetooth speakers or, that kind of whatever, this T-shirt with that kind of design that I show them or whatever. You can compare easily, the quotes from 5, 10, 20 different suppliers in these kinds of product categories. For the, pretty much the same product. And then when you have no clue, because you're a new buyer, right? You have no clue, well, who are you going to go with? Well, very often it's tempting to go with the lowest price supplier. And I've seen some people, think, like I'm so smart, all of these guys are trading companies or they're trying to overcharge me. Oh, this, like, I found a factory. I mean, it's the factory, right? Because it's the cheapest one. And then, it's a honest factory because they're not trying to overcharge me. I'm like, dude, this is really, really dangerous. Really dangerous. Okay. Because let's say you go with, you have quotes from 20 different suppliers. And let's say you have maybe a dozen of them roughly within 5 or 10% of each other. And then you have, a few above or way above, and then a few below or even way below. Well, the ones that are below, way below, these ones are high risk. And okay, if really getting the lowest price and so on, right, it's really important for you. You're in, I don't know, in promotional items, giveaway stuff that just has to be cheap. Doesn't matter if quality is bad. Doesn't matter, as long as they make it cheap and they deliver it on time and like everybody's happy. Maybe you go with these kinds of suppliers, but that is high risk. In other cases, I would say you say, okay, these are outliers. I completely erase them from the list. I don't want to talk to them. Okay, because there's 3 cases. Number one, they don't really know what they're doing. They don't care. They hack together some kind of quote, but they don't really know. Okay, no good. Not a good sign. Number 2, they're very aggressive because they know that they're more likely to get business. And then once they start to work on sampling and everything, they can find some excuses to say, oh, well, actually, you had not told me about that. Actually, it makes things much more complicated. So the price is higher, 25% higher. And then suddenly they're back in the black. Whereas before, with the price that they gave, there was no way they could make a profit. They would be losing money. So that's no good because they raised the price on you. And number 3 is even worse because they're actually planning to cheapen the product, behind your back, mess up with your requirements and just deliver something substandard. And they're not going to tell you, they're just going to, reduce their cost because you push them to reduce their price, right? And in the minds of a lot of Chinese suppliers, this is actually quite reasonable. And I've read a few times that if you actually sue them, their defense would basically be, okay, well, usually the price for this kind of product is, $8.50. And they push me for the lowest price, and I charge them $6. So they knew, it's pretty obvious the quality is not going to be great. And you know what? In a Chinese court, this is actually not a bad defense, because fairness, what the judge thinks is fair, plays a huge role. And in China, doing things in a fair way, trumps a lot of other considerations. Even if you give them a standard, it was written, it was documented, okay, it's stronger. But still, if the judge says, well, it was not really fair to expect, top quality for the lowest price, it doesn't really happen, right? So it happens in places like China, where you always have a certain portion of the suppliers that want to be aggressive, are not afraid of risk, are not afraid of getting into a difficult conversation, are not afraid for their reputation, engage in these kinds of schemes, unfortunately. Okay, it's not that common, let's say, in India or in Vietnam, or in places where they tend to be a bit more conservative and less aggressive, right? So, yeah, the lowest price. It's a very common trap. Okay.
Well, it makes sense though, because we're not buying, a bag of apples from the market here. If you're pushing for the lowest price, just from a quality perspective, you're not going to be guaranteeing yourself the best possible quality, are you?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it kind of makes sense. But some people just think, especially buyers who have no understanding of what's going on, behind the price and behind the faces that they see, right? They look at the price and say, well, these guys are trying to overcharge me, and these ones are trying harder. Okay, this is better if I work with these guys. They're not trying to grab a lot of value out of me, right? Because they just don't understand, and it's kind of sad. But there's a lot of people like this out there.
Well, that's the learning experience, and that's what this podcast's about, right? So,
yes,
okay,
right.
so that's sort of being on a quest to get the lowest price all the time.
Right. Yeah, another one, a big one, is to agree on crazy payment terms. And there's a lot of people who do that. They meet a supplier and they're like, wow, these people are so nice, and they also want to be kind of nice. Okay. Right. And the supplier says, well, we need to, this is not so easy, but okay, we'll try our best. They're like, how can I motivate them? And the supplier says, okay, it's going to be $50,000 or whatever. And then the buyer's like, okay, like, if you make it like that, like, I'll pay you everything up front, so you don't have any problem with cash or whatever, right? This is crazy. Or sometimes the buyers, because they're very good at feeling who is a new buyer versus an experienced buyer, they would just write, 100% prepayment. Ouch. And buyers like, it's kind of the price, and sometimes it gives more confidence to the buyer. They're like, well, this supplier, they have a lot of business. It's reassuring, they have a high confidence. It means they have a lot of other happy customers. I need to follow their rules to get an entry, right? Again, completely crazy. Very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. You put the money down now. What's the incentive? What is the incentive for the supplier? You pay me 100%. I haven't started to do anything yet. Now I have some other customers at the same time. They're pushing me to deliver fast, pushing me for this, pushing me for that. I only got like 20 or 30% down, and then I need to ship fast. The earlier I ship, the earlier I get the remaining 70 or 80%. Well, of course, these guys are gonna be first. And then there's this other customer. Well, they have a contract with penalty for late shipment. Of course, it's gonna be first, right? And then. And how about you? You paid 100%. If supplier is busy, you're never going to get your products, because there's always going to be another one who is more more urgent somehow, right? And then if you get your order, well, are they going to be very careful? Not really, right? And that leads me to another mistake, because these two usually come together, is to just trust the supplier, even the first time, not do any inspections. Okay, not send an inspector to the factory or yourself go to the factory and check on production. Well, if you paid everything up front, even if you find problems, again, what's the incentive? They're not going to care. They're going to say, well, we think it's okay, or something like that. Well, we think you can sell it on your market, or you never told us that your market was so picky, and they're just going to sitting there and basically you take your products or you leave it, take it or leave it, that's it. We're not going to do much. Sorry, right? And you have zero leverage. You have zero leverage to push them to go fast, and you have zero leverage to push them to do a good job quality-wise, right? So this is a horrible combination, right? And it leads me to another mistake. Then, let's say number 3. As I mentioned, is you don't try to check production quality, and then you receive the products, and then you hope for the best. And maybe you've already sold it to some of your customers, promised them to deliver it by a certain date, and now you're rushing to sort out, these 30% of bad products out of the rest of the good products, or maybe everything is bad for one reason or another. And what are you going to do now, right? You've already paid everything. You've paid also with your time. You've been waiting, and you've paid for shipment and maybe import duties, maybe tariffs. Okay, and now you have this batch of products. And in some cases, you might have to just dump it. I mean, this is an enormous cost to the environment also, to get all these materials and process them and ship them across the world, halfway across the world. And then you just send them to landfill. It's just crazy, right? I mean, it just happens way too often. And so I always tell buyers, at least you start to work with a new supplier. The first 3 or 4 productions, you get to follow them, including inspecting quality in the factory. Now, after 3 or 4, you've done a good job, and you can see that they're not trying to play games and everything. Okay, you can start to relax a bit. If everything's been really stellar, really good, okay, you go random. You go 1 in 3, telling them at the last minute or something like that, right?
Yeah.
To keep a little bit of pressure. And the very first one, you spend extra resources on it to give them some feedback very early on also, because maybe it's a new product for them, or maybe your standard is new to them, or whatever. It's good to give them some feedback as soon as they start production. Okay, so more effort on the first one, and if it's okay, go second one, third one, fourth one. If everything is really good, then you go random. That's what I would say. And then if you have an existing supplier, you are sure that it's the same factory. Okay, great. And then it's a new product. But the new product, the clock starts from scratch again. There's new risks with a new product, so you need to again go back to checking all of the batches, and then the first time paying more attention, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, talking about quality, new buyers very often get some kind of prototype or sample, and the supplier says, okay, this is the final sample. If it's okay, we're going to production. And the buyer interprets that as, we can definitely get production exactly like this on 100% of the pieces. Okay?
Yeah.
The buyer, again, people who don't really understand how things are running, they will tend to think it's a commitment. This is the standard, and it's going to be like this on all of the production, right? And then if they're wise, they send an inspector. Inspector says, oh, well, there's whatever, 20% of bad products, or even just 5% of bad products, which actually on consumer products, general consumer products, first time you work with a new supplier is actually quite common in China,
Right.
or Vietnam or India. And then you say, well, wait a minute, how come it's different? Or maybe, I don't know, maybe there's a plastic injection mold, and well, then you say, hey, but on the sample, I didn't have a parting line here, and like the injection gate here, and this and that. It really looks different now. And the supplier says, but come on, it's pretty obvious. It was before tooling, things are different after tooling. And the new buyer who was discovering all this said, well, you should have told me. Right? And in their minds, every one of them is right. Actually, every one of them is wrong. Both of them should have planned for that and mentioned it, right? So pre-production samples, whatever, final prototype before production, Chinese suppliers use them to sell the project to you. They're not using them as much to set a standard. Sorry about that. That's not the way it works. This is to sell, to get the PO, to get the first payment, to get moving in direction of mass production and payment of mass production. That's it. You have to take that into account. You need to prepare a specification sheet, a checklist, whatever you call it. Very, very important. Okay. Now, when it comes to, trusting the supplier, sometimes people have been burned by a Chinese supplier, let's say, and they're very, and then from that day on, they don't trust anybody, and they really show it, right? And that, if you do it in a very obvious manner, is not going to help you. But I'm sure you see why, right? You keep sort of questioning their intentions, in a very open way, and it's pretty obvious that you don't trust them. Over the top, that's going to be a problem. Okay. Well, suppliers are just going to hate you, right? And they're not going to want to read your emails. They're going to wait until, the last thing in the day. Oh, sorry. Oh, something else. Okay, I'll look at it tomorrow. They're not going to want to work on your projects. They're not going to want to do a call with you. Well, guess what? It means they don't pay much attention to your orders at the end of the day. That's really what I observed. It's really sad, but so don't trust too much and say, okay, oh, you want payment in upfront is fine. Let's send the money. Blah, blah. Okay, that is just dumb. But then, if you go harsh on them and show them that you don't trust them, you're just an ass. You're not someone that they want to talk to. Okay, and that's also a problem. I've seen some people alienate their salesperson to the point where salesperson doesn't even want to respond to their emails, talk to them, and doesn't want to work on following up on what's going on. And it's just very messy, right? So you're really shooting yourself in the foot if you do that.
Well, would you behave in a different way with a Chinese supplier, let's say, as you would with somebody in your own country? Because you shouldn't.
Yeah, no, anyway, you should not, obviously, right? But maybe in your own country, maybe people are used to, having a customer who keeps complaining or whatever. And but in China, it's like, oh, okay, they hate me, so I hate them, and like that's it. They really don't want to do anything with you. Different cultures, right? In different countries, it might be a little bit different. But of course, I wouldn't say it's always a nice thing, right? Maybe in the US, where they have, they sue each other, New York people, let's say, they're like, oh, okay, well, you do that. Okay, we'll see you in court or whatever, but okay, let's keep doing business on that other thing. It's really weird. It's kind of a way of life sometimes for some of these people. Right? Different countries, and I'm exaggerating, obviously.
Yeah.
Different cultures, different approaches to business, right? Okay, so another one is about planning, the schedule. And first time you work with a supplier, you have to plan for delays. You have to plan for things that don't go according to schedule. They might receive some of the material. Just if they receive just one component late, the whole project is late, right?
Yeah.
And then they might find some quality issues or whatever. Maybe they don't tell you, but they try to fix it a little bit and so on. Spend a few more days, and then maybe you find some issues and then need some time to rework, and then all of a sudden everything is 4 or 5 weeks late. So, ouch, or maybe they're waiting for an approval from you, and they're waiting and they don't get it, and it pushes things 2 or 3 weeks late. Because maybe on your side, you're waiting for an approval from your customer. But hey, if you don't give that kind of approval to your supplier, everything is frozen. You are postponing the project. I see some people don't really get that. They're like, no, you said 45 days from PO. But we're waiting for your approval on this. Well, whatever. You should have told me it would be late. Come on, again and again, right? Assumptions are going to kill you.
Yeah.
So not everything gets communicated properly. So you should ask questions, not assume, right? So that's something you need to include at least, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks. The first time you make a product in a certain factory, at least 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then if you push them to rush, hey, no, it really has to ship on that day. Like, no, it's got to be that vessel. You got to make that shipping time, right? Then they might have to rush. They might have to maybe even put an all-nighter for you, right? And then you receive it and you're not happy about quality. Well, guess what? You give them an excuse. Well, yeah, but you told you pushed us to rush. And of course, we rushed, and like people were tired or whatever. Right? We didn't have time to inspect. If you push them on one thing and don't mention that quality's got to be the same, as per standard and so on and so forth, they're just going to focus on that one thing, and they will be very good at focusing on that one thing. The Chinese suppliers can be really, really fast, but they're not going to be great on quality wise, and they might tell you that there's some cost overruns, so next time it's more expensive, or these kinds of things are very, very common. Let me see. What was the next one? Well, being left in the dark regarding your own supply chain, and that's something we covered a number of times on this podcast. You work with a quote unquote agent or a company that says, oh yeah, we are a factory, we are a manufacturer, don't worry, we know all that, we can take care of it, blah blah blah. And these people, they act as your supplier and they are not transparent, and you don't know where that critical part comes from and that other critical part of material comes from. And then when issues come up and you want to know what's going on, what they're doing to fix it, maybe you've come to China, you want to go and have a look at that component supplier to see what's going on. Sorry, cannot go. Ouch. Even if maybe you have a great engineer on your team who knows exactly that process. No, sorry, cannot go. Right? If the supplier messes things up and everything, you haven't learned anything about the process, about what's important, what's not important. You have to start from scratch looking for another supplier. And of course, it's their purpose, right? They make it hard to switch to another supplier. But this is really not your interest. So anyway, we covered that a number of times in past episodes. It's really important.
Yes.
Transparency and control, right? Another one is, we go back to quality and like the quality standard. Something is really important about your product, but you don't describe it clearly. You don't document it, right? What's going to happen is the supplier doesn't know and is not going to pay attention to it, not going to care, right? So in China, there's a rule. If it's not written, it doesn't exist. Okay. But this is true. You work in India, and you don't tell them that I don't know, the the metal, the finishing has to be like this, the die cast, it cannot be more porous than this much, or that it's very, very important that the anodizing is this shade of blue, like with very little variation, blah blah blah, or that kind of the plastic part has to be that softness and has okay, and the front of it is the aesthetics. We don't want any melting line or anything. Okay, if you don't say it, it's like going to Las Vegas and betting everything on red, right? It's really very risky. And I see some people, for example, okay, they approve samples about the product and everything, and they don't think about packaging. And then the supplier says, oh, by the way, for packaging, like we do as usual for the other customers, right? And the buyer who's new to the job says, yeah, right, that sounds great. Sure. You know better than me. Ouch. Supplier is going to pick the cheapest stuff, right? Not going to put like even maybe one in a poly bag. Not even going to do like a master poly bag, 50 products inside, huge, big carton, and ship it all over to you, and who cares, right? Very dangerous. Packaging is very important to protect the products. And yeah, and you might have to repack it properly to send it to stores or things like that, right? And what does that do to your costs, right? It's crazy.
Yeah, in my experience when dealing with different suppliers or people that you're outsourcing to in Asia, it's just always better to be ultra clear and make sure everything is totally clarified from the beginning.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You got to be as specific as possible. You cannot be too specific. Let's say it this way. But of course, if it's very, very specific, and so you got to get on a call with them and go over it to make sure they understand. Maybe you get to get it translated into the local language, so that it's not just the salesperson, but the technical people, the purchasing people, and so on, who actually will be able to read it and understand it. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's super important. The next one is, as I said, you start to work with a new supplier. New product, new factory. Okay, the first order. Well, if you haven't done a great job actually qualifying their production process, giving them very early feedback, maybe on a pilot run, etc., well, there's a certain probability that the first run is not going to be very good, first batch. It's going to be, in some cases, half of the products are bad, or 20% of the products are bad. Okay, you're not happy, and then you push them maybe to rework if you catch it, or even worse, you receive it in your country. Very painful. Okay. So, question is, what to do for next time? So the supplier usually, either they are too conservative and they will say, well, that's really not so good. This product is not good. Like, we don't really want to do that again, Or most of the time, especially Chinese suppliers, they will try to say, hey, okay, yeah, like, sorry about that, but you were not so clear about this and not so clear about that. So we can give you like a 10% discount on the second order, to cover some of that. But they will never send you money back. Like, that usually doesn't happen. So a lot of buyers say, okay, the second one, okay, you know what to avoid this time, right? And it's costing you, so you will pay attention, right? Okay, let's do second order. Enormous mistake. Enormous mistake. It's going to be worse the second time. Yeah, that's surprising, but most of the time it gets worse. Okay, in some cases, no. In some cases, they understand they made a mistake. Okay, and they pay attention second time, and it's okay. But in many, many cases, that's not true. the manufacturing process is still bad. They haven't given the feedback to their own supplier. Maybe it's their own supplier made really bad job, right? And the manufacturing process of that supplier is not fixed, right? And you give them another order and you allow them to go into mass production again, without properly qualifying things. And bang, same result or even worse. No, you should say, oh, hey, I would only go ahead with this new order if you do a proper pre-production pilot run and we qualify that things are okay. If it's not okay, you're going to fix it and do a new small run of 50 pieces, 100 pieces, on the assembly lines, on everything like mass production. And we'll have someone there to check it up. That's the safe way to go at it, right? And of course, with a corrective action plan to actually understand what caused the mess up. But new buyers who have no clue, usually they don't want to go into the details of what went wrong. They don't want to go into a corrective action plan. They don't even think about it usually. And if the supplier writes something, they have no clue. They don't know how to actually confirm, they've touched on a root cause. And yes, the countermeasure makes sense, right? Anyway, big mistake. And if they give you a 10%, 20% discount on the second one, what do you think? They, now they're under pressure to get cheaper, to do something substandard. You're actually shooting yourself in the foot. It's really bad. So that's a huge pitfall that so many companies fall into. And the second one, maybe is bad, and then they go ahead with the third one again. It's crazy. Sometimes they have to deliver something to their customers, so they have no time to think, and they're like, okay, then we need to go into the next order very fast, and you need to get it right this time. Okay, all right. Very bad. Okay.
You mentioned pilot runs there, quite timely, because actually I'm talking to Andrew about pilot runs next week for all the listeners. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah, important topic. Yes. And then, the last one I covered in that article, and it's still an important topic, is about the intellectual property rights. And a relatively simple measure and relatively inexpensive. Of course, I guess if you have your own brand name, you register the trademark in your country. Okay, great. What about China? So people say, well, I don't want to sell into China, right? But then if you don't register your trademark in China, somebody else can, because anybody who goes and file it the first time will get the trademark. Now, if you are a Coca-Cola or Nike, you can challenge that in a Chinese court. But if your brand is not really known in China, then there's very little you can do. Okay, so you register your trademark in China. So, as I said, it will prevent another company from doing that. Why is that important? Because if you work with supplier A, and then the relationship kind of turns sour, and then you go to supplier B. Supplier A can bother you quite a bit. Maybe they, or in the name of their cousin somewhere, someone from their extended family or friend or whatever, in their personal name, they will register the trademark. There's no way for you to prove that it's your supplier that did that. So you can really sue them for that. But then they can use the trademark registration to actually request that supplier B stops production because it's illegal in China, right? Because another company has the trademark and they have that brand name corresponding to the trademark. And they can give the information to the Chinese customs. And if the Chinese customs check the shipment, they will actually block it because they'll say, hey, you use the brand here, but it's another company that has the trademark and they registered it with us. So this is not legal, right? So that's one way of seeing it. And then another way of looking at it is, if your supplier goes rogue and makes the product behind your back or something, you can use the fact that you own the trademark in China to put pressure on them and stop them. Okay. So powerful approach here.
And cost-wise, registering a trademark in China, it's nothing like registering patents. So it's definitely something to consider, even if you're, a smaller business.
Right. Yeah, right. So that's 10 common mistakes by new buyers in. I had China in mind at the time, but a lot of these. Well, anyway, in Vietnam, there's a lot of Chinese suppliers, right? It's Vietnam manufacturing, but it's Chinese suppliers, so it's a lot of the same behaviors. And anyway, when it comes to not documenting the standard properly and things like that, it's going to hurt you anyway, where you arrange for OEM, ODM, or contract manufacturing. It's going to hurt you anyway. So this is good advice, I think.
Yeah, good tips. So that's basically what not to do. A big old list of what you don't want to be falling into the trap of doing. So it's a good one. So let's wrap it up this time, Renaud. But thanks for coming on, and thanks to everybody for listening.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast, brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.